Well,
in
let
the
me
grand
go
scheme
back
of things.
to that's a great answer. I appreciate that. Let me go back to your question of how do we know which one of those we would pick? For me, that comes down to one question: what do you do with Jesus? And so you're looking at this guy who we know existed, who did stuff, who said stuff. We've got it down, and I know a lot of people might disagree about what he did or how he did it, but historically, I mean, our calendars are marked by the guy. He lived on Earth. Something happened.
Well, yeah, but so do you know why our calendars are marked by his birth?
Well, before we get there, it's not, dude, there's no intelligent historian that denies the historicity of Jesus. We all know the guy existed.
I'm going to need a citation for that. Because it's not that there's no historian that doubts the historicity of Jesus. It's that there's no mainstream New Testament scholar that doubts the historicity of Jesus. And there's actually about
so are
20,
there secular historians that don't believe in Jesus, that they don't believe he ever
Yes.
existed?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll say they either don't think he existed or doubts, or at least is favorable to doubting his existence. There's at least 27 scholars who have degrees in relevant fields that at least say that doubting the historicity of Jesus is a viable thing to do. So, I mean, there's plenty of them out there, and I always caution people to say that it's not that mainstream historians think this, it's that New Testament scholars think this. And there's a bit of a difference there. I know that New Testament scholars, they do dabble in history a little bit, but New Testament scholarship is really tangential to history. They're not trained as historians, but yet they speak on historical matters. So, I mean, I don't mean for this to become the entire conversation, obviously, but I am a mythicist. So I don't think that Jesus existed as a historical person. I think that he was always thought of as purely celestial. Even by Paul is the earliest. But for the purposes of this conversation and the conversation of Pascal's wager, I'm totally fine with just the assumption that Jesus existed.
Well, let me just answer the question of how I would pick Christianity over the other ones, why I believe that's a safer bet. So, I mean, my first college I went to was completely secular, and that's where I took my first history classes in college, and they thought of Jesus. They wouldn't agree with how the Bible defines Jesus, how I would see it, but they all seemed to agree that he existed. He was a great teacher to them amongst Muhammad and the other guys. And so I would say that when we're dealing with Jesus, I would look at who deals with Jesus the best way. And so Jesus says some controversial things such as, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And so then you go into that. Is he a liar? Is he a lunatic? Or is he for real? We need to find out the evidence. And I would say Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, deals with what happened with the life of Jesus better than the other religions, which is why I would see it as the safe bet. Now, you might not see that as a safe bet, but to explain why I would pick this one tiny sliver and say it's the safest bet, that's why I would go with it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there were plenty of apocalyptic Jewish rabbis that were running around the first century, claiming the exact same things about it. The way, the truth, and the life thing, we can't actually pin that to Jesus actually saying it. That was actually, I believe that comes from the Gospels. I don't think that that's in Paul. Am I right about that?
Yeah, just the book of John is where we see that.
But yeah, book of John. Well, see, the book of John is most definitely a second century gospel document. And so it actually redacts and changes like the previous gospels that were written. So, I mean, that one I would consider to be too late. Out of all the gospels, I would say that Mark is probably the most historical one, although there's no real good methodology to separate out the historical information from fictional information as far as Jesus is concerned in the Gospel of Mark. So, none of the information that's contained in the Gospels it can be considered historical information because of the fact that we can't separate out fiction from history in them. And so, what for me personally, I feel like you kind of have to go on Paul's writings that are about Jesus. So if you're asking like who handles this Jesus person better, I feel like that's kind of cherry picking your people in history? Like, why are you focusing on this particular Jesus?
The guy that rises from the dead has more weight to me than the dudes that are still in the grave for me. And we're not going to agree on this, and I realize that. And I know that you don't see that as an argument. I'm saying that's why I would pick this sliver.
Well, yeah, but do you understand that there are plenty, let's go between Christianity and Islam. Islam affirms that Jesus existed, says that he was a prophet and all this other stuff. But they have this extra, testament, I guess, or these extra writings from Muhammad, who was inspired by an angel to write all this stuff down. Like, apparently he was illiterate, or he couldn't write or something like that. Some degree. So, and this is happening 600 years after Jesus supposedly died. And I mean, that particular book says that, well, he didn't actually rise from the dead. So, I mean, it just kind of seems a bit cherry picking to me, because
but technically, to be consistent, you cherry pick it too. I've watched a good bit on your channel, and you spend a lot more time going against the Christian Jesus than you deal with Muhammad. And both of these people would be considered theists, and you're an atheist, which means you shouldn't agree with either one of us, but you spend a lot more time on the Jesus than you do the Muhammad. So technically, we're both sort of cherry picking when it comes to that.
Well, no, I'm not cherry picking, because I criticize both religions. Maybe not. I maybe don't spend as much time on the topic of Islam than I do on the topic of Christianity, but that's because I'm in North Alabama. Christianity is what I'm faced with most of the time when I interact, either online or anywhere. But I have no problems with responding or disagreeing with Islam. So, I mean, I'm not really cherry picking, because I'm not saying, oh, well, Islam's better than Christianity. I was merely pointing out that, like, there's these two different religions, and you seem to just be focusing on the one that you kind of grew up in, or the one that you've been exposed to the most. And you're saying, well, that one is more likely to be true than this one, but not really giving a reason as to why this one is a false religion while yours is the one true religion.
Well, I'll be honest with you. You're the first atheist I've discussed with or seen in a debate that believes that there is plausible deniability for the life of Jesus. Most of the people I've run across are very cool with saying, yeah, the guy existed. We're pretty cool with that. And so for me, I would go with the mainstream and say, yeah, Jesus existed. And then I look for who deals with him and what he did the best. And then obviously, I mean, for me, I'm not going to take this and turn it into a he said, she said business. Well, actually, he said, my bad. But also for me, it's personal experience. So like, I know who I was before I turned to Christ. I know who I was after. And so for me, there's also a personal experience element in there. And so I'm looking for a system that helps me understand what has happened in my life and who this figure is. And I find Christianity the best answer. And it's okay if you don't, but that's where I would be on it.